before we do the reading section, I want to kind of outline the some of the grammar rules that we're going to need in order to do well on the reading section. Okay, so the first one is just commas, right? Okay, so knowing when to use a comma or when commas are used is going to help a lot because so the first time to use a comma, one of the reasons to use a comma is to separate two complete sentences, right? Okay, and you can do that by using the comma plus one of the fanboys. Okay, and the fanboy stands for and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Okay, so if you have a comma plus one of the fanboys, generally that means that what comes before is a complete idea, what comes after it is a complete idea. Okay. All right. Second reason to use a comma is to separate a describing phrase. Okay. So, for example, like walking into the room, comma, Patrick waved hi. Okay. So this is a very common sentence structure that I use especially when I'm meeting with students. So the phrase walking into the room is separated by a comma from the main sentence. And the main sentence here is Patrick waved hi. All right, Patrick is the subject, waved is a verb, hi is the object. But then this phrase is telling me what Patrick was doing when he was waving hi. Okay. Third reason is, of course, after every item on a list. Okay. And I don't think I need to really go over that. Okay. But then the fourth reason is to surround unnecessary information. Okay. So the example that I can give you is, for example, Patrick, comma, the father of the missing journalist, or let's just say person, comma, was worried. Okay. So the actual sentence here is Patrick was worried, right? And then you'll notice that the phrase, the father of the missing person, is surrounded by commas. So what the commas are telling us now is that what's in between these two commas is actually unnecessary, so you can just take them out, right? So then now the sentence is actually Patrick was worried, but the fact that the phrase Patrick, the father of the missing person, is there gives us more information about who or what Patrick is, right? Okay. And the reason why commas play a big role is because oftentimes the author will use that to elaborate further on what they're saying. Okay. And I think a lot of students, they're great at reading, but they're horrible at kind of using the commas and the punctuation and the grammar to help them figure out what they're reading, right? And for me, like when I'm reading something, I can't help but use the grammar, right? So if I see like a pronoun, I'm always looking at who or what are they talking about and things of that sort. Okay. So grammar does definitely help improve the reading skills. Okay. So let's take a look at this first passage that we have right here. Okay. So this is a reading passage. This is an excerpt from a book that was used with one of the SAT reading passages. So what we did was we categorized all the reading passages or the books that the reading passages are from, went back to those passages or the source, and it found other excuse me, other passages or other parts from it, and then kind of put them out and then made them into made them here so that we can practice it, right? Okay, so let's take a look at, let's just do a couple of pages here. Okay, so the first page, so this is the first sentence that we see, right? Hammer dangling from his hand like a savage's axe. Nawab entered the oily room housing the pump and its electric motor, right? So we actually parsed out the sentence, okay? And just looking at the sentence, I see this little comma right here, okay? So now this is kind of like the second reason, right? It's to separate a describing phrase from the main sentence, okay? So hammer dangling from his hand like a savage's axe. So that's definitely not the sentence, right? So that's just describing something. And who or what is it describing? It's describing Nawab, right? And here the sentence is the subject, Nawab, the verb entered. What did he enter? The oily room, right? Which is the object of the sentence, okay? And then oily room, yeah. And then housing the pump and its electric motor is giving me more or describing more about the phrase room, right? Okay, so as a reader, right, like this, I can choose to kind of ignore or gloss over this describing phrase, or I can just kind of look at it and say, okay, so why does the author choose to tell me or describe Nuab like with a hammer dangling from his hand like a savage's axe, right? And it's obvious that the author wants us to kind of see, Nuab as kind of this kind of figure, right? Okay, so like when we do like a reading boot camp with some of our students, what we're going to do is we're going to break the sentences down into like the subject, the describing phrase, the verb, and the object. And all of these are very important because that structure tells us what the author wants you to see when you read it, okay? All right, and then the next sentence here is, so silence. And this is a sentence on its own. So technically, even though there isn't a subject, verb, and object here, right, the author just chose to use the word silence as a sentence because now he wants to emphasize the word silence, right? Like this is quiet, okay? So then if we look at the rest of the sentence, the men crowded the doorway till he shouted that he must have light. So the men is a subject, crowded is a verb, the doorway is the object, okay? And then till he is another subject, okay? So I'm just gonna put S, V, O, S, V, okay? And then this is like the object, okay? And here we have like kind of two subject, verb, object sets, right? And so the men is different from the pronoun he, right? So as I'm reading this, I'm saying, who or what is the he referring to? Well, he must be referring to Nuab because Nuab came in the previous sentence, right? And plus, men is plural, okay? So the pronoun he cannot refer to the men, right? And they would have to say like they, right? So now I know that Nuab shouted that he has to have light, okay? And I know that the men crowded the doorway, right? So this is kind of like a big deal or like a big event, right? Because he walks in there with his hammer dangling like a savage's axe, and the men are silenced, but there's a lot of them, and they crowded the doorway, right? Okay. So then he approached the offending object warily, but with his temper rising, circled it, pushed it about a bit, began to take liberties with it, settled with it, called for a cup of tea next to it, and finally began disassembling it, right? Now, surprisingly, right, the commas that we see here, right, one here, one here, one here, right, these commas are part of a list, right? They're being used to separate items in the list, okay? So, but before we go into that, let's take a look at the first part. He approached the offending object, okay? So now he is Nuab, right? Because remember we talked about the men circling, crowding the doorway, but the men are plural. They don't talk about any specific or singular person. So he still has to refer to Nuab, right? Approached, right? This is the verb. Okay, the offending object. Okay, so that's the object of the sentence. But we also know that it's the what is it? The oil room that houses the pump and the electric motor, right? So the offending object is probably referring to the pump and the electric motor. Okay. Yeah. Warily, but with his temper rising, circled it. So like these are the things that is happening, right? Circled it, pushed about a bit. So like he's doing all these things to it, right? Okay. So like the point that I want to make to a lot of the people that watch this or kind of are exposed to this is that there's a big difference between the way that your student does the reading versus the way that we do the reading, right? Because most students, there's a difference between like just seeing the word, recognizing the word, and being able to read the word versus kind of analyzing the sentence structure, referring back to the noun that it's referring to, the pronoun that it's referring to, right? Who or what they're talking about, and things of that sort. Okay. Okay. And then, with his long, blunt screwdriver, he cracked the shield, hiding the machine's ventrilia, a screw popping loose and flying into the shadows. Okay. Okay. So, the sentence here is actually he is the subject, verb is the cracked. And what did he crack? The shield, right? That's the object. Okay. And this part tells me more about the shield, right? What is the shield doing? Okay. And then this comma is telling me that this is a describing phrase of what happens after the ventrilia comes out, right? With the screw bump popping out loose and flying into the shadows. And his long, blunt screwdriver, right? It's just these two words are just describing the word screwdriver, okay? And what he did with that, right? So these are all just describing phrase. But at the end of the day, it's he cracked the shield, hiding the machine's ventrilia, okay? The other thing is that when you see this word, like the word ventrilia, right? Most people, I don't know what the word ventrilia is, but I do know that it's a shield of some sort or that's hiding something. It's something that's hard to get to, okay? Right, because he needed a long, blunt screwdriver to crack that open, okay? All right, and then he took the ball peen and delivered a crafty blow, okay? So there's no commas, there's no punctuation here, but here we have the subject he, verb is took, and when he take the ball peen, the object, and then delivered. So that's another verb. A crafty blow is the object, right? So this sentence kind of gives us a lot of information because now they took out the pencilia, the screw flew off, and then he took out a ball peen. I don't know what a ball peen is, but I do know that that's something that you can use to deliver a crafty blow, right? So if you don't know what the word crafty means, but the word crafty is an adverb. So uh, so it's describing the word blow, right? So what kind of blow, right? So yeah, sure, but I might not know exactly what they mean specifically by crafty, but I do know that he takes the ball peen and he hits it, right? He hits the machine or the pencilia or whatever it is, right? Okay, okay. So I'll stop here, but like the key here is that your job as a reader on these things is to read carefully, right? To break things down. So whenever I tell students that they're not reading carefully enough, they kind of have no idea what I really mean because they just sit there and they're like, "Well, I am reading carefully," but they're not analyzing the words, the sentence structure, and seeing how the grammar affects the sentence structure of everything else. Okay. So I'm going to keep this short just because I've been sick the last couple of days. But yeah, this is kind of the way that we do reading when students are struggling with the reading section, and it does work out really well because it does force the students to engage with the material and to think more than just what that sentence is saying. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good day.